Can you would say those words to you? And I'm so sorry that that happened to you.
Dirty Harry tactics. That wasn't my line. It came from the bench in a Detroit case where dash cam video showed a surrender turn into a beating. The officer went to prison. Then in Portland, a man cloaking threats in free speech left 2 riders dead and received life without parole. And in Georgia, a convoy crashed a child's celebration with flags and threats and learned how intimidation becomes felonies. 3 arenas of fear: institutional power abused, ideology turned lethal, and organized racial terror. Watch the courtrooms decide where duty ends and criminality begins.
If you have a place for me here, Lord, you need to be so grand. I never expected to have too much. But if you don't, I understand.
Power crossing the line isn't abstract. It's what you watch when authority meets evidence, and the gap between duty and domination is measured in frames and bruises. When power crosses the line begins with a traffic stop that should have ended with a citation and a drive home. You see the lights, the siren, the stop. Then the dash cam rolls. Floyd Dent steps out, hands visible. The footage shows Officer William Melendez approaching with his gun drawn, a chokehold applied, and a flurry of blows, 16 punches, while Dent is already on the ground. In that frame-by-frame world, Melendez didn't just face a suspect. He faced the law. Video captures what adrenaline can excuse in memory: commands, compliance, then an escalation that drew national scrutiny. The moment lands with force in the courtroom because the dash cam doesn't get tired. It doesn't change its story, and jurors can replay it until split second starts to look like a choice. The officer's name is on the screen, but what's really on trial is authority under pressure. The defense leaned into danger. They argued control during an unpredictable stop, the kind where a misread movement can end in tragedy. Training teaches dominance to end threats quickly, they said, and the environment was volatile. They asked the jury to weigh chaos against hindsight and to see tactics, not cruelty. The prosecution answered with duty and limits. They walked the jury through each movement and each command, then matched it to the force applied. Excessive, they said, an abuse of authority that turned a legal detention into a criminal act. In their telling, the power of the badge became a weapon after surrender. Michigan law drew the lines. Assault with intent to do great bodily harm requires more than bad judgment. It demands proof that the force aimed at serious injury. Misconduct in office turns on a public official corruptly misusing authority. The elements hang on intent, proportionality, and duty. That word duty anchors every frame of the video. Was the force a necessary response to a real threat or a punitive act under color of law? The human cost came in and stayed. Dent's injuries were cataloged marks from the chokehold, swelling from the punches, but paper doesn't show the way basic tasks turned into obstacles, or how sleep fractures, when a routine stop becomes a nightmare you relive. In court, his account carried weight: days lost to recovery, pain that lingered, and the fear that spreads when an encounter with police becomes a story families whisper to one another. Trust frayed at the edges. In neighborhoods already anxious, one stop became a symbol of what people worry will happen when they comply and still get hurt. Evidence moved in a steady rhythm. The dash cam played. Officer reports were read. Experts on the use of force continuum explain policy. Verbal commands, control holds, higher levels only when necessary. They showed where the line is meant to be drawn and how crossing it turns trained tactics into unlawful domination. The tape didn't argue. It simply repeated. Then the judicial voice cut through. The court rejected the idea that this was a split-second misperception.
You utilize your dirty, hairy tactics and use excessive force to arrest him.
A rebuke that stripped away any veneer of routine police work. It reframed the case from rapid decision-making to an officer imposing his will in violation of the law. Sentencing loomed like a referendum. Was this a mistake that deserves leniency or criminal assault by someone entrusted with state power? Both sides knew what the number would signal to the department, to the city, to every stop that would follow. You could feel the gallery hold its breath. The verdict arrived with precision: guilty on all counts, assault with intent to do great bodily harm, and misconduct in office. The sentence followed: 13 months to 10 years for the assault on Floyd Dent. The courtroom heard remorse. It also heard a boundary that will echo in training sessions and legal briefs for years. Authority has limits. When you cross them, the uniform becomes evidence, not a shield. From there, the focus shifts from a badge to a voice. What happens when a public space hears words sharpen into threats, and the line between expression and violence snaps in seconds?
George Floyd! George Floyd! I should have killed you, bitch! I should have killed you, bitch! Everybody knows you're alive! Everybody knows you're alive, huh?
Words That Turn to Murder begins on a Portland Max train where racist harassment of two black teenagers wearing hijabs drew a line in the air that others tried to hold. Jeremy Christian's taunts and threats weren't abstract. They were aimed at perceived faith and identity, and when bystanders stepped in, the confrontation moved from speech to steel in seconds. In the courtroom, the battle lines were clear. The defense leaned on speech protections and provocation, pointing to the First Amendment and the chaos of a moving train. They argued that vile insults remain protected until a physical act crosses the threshold, urging jurors to separate offensive ideology from criminal liability and to see volatility rather than premeditation. The prosecution mapped motive and intent. They laid out threats, movements, and a burst of violence that left two men, Ricky Best and Taliesin Namkai Meche, dead, and Micah Fletcher grievously injured. Under Oregon law, aggravated and first-degree murder turn on intent and specific aggravators, with penalties that include life without parole, bias crimes, charged here as 4 counts of second-degree intimidation, focus on targeting victims for perceived race or religion. The statutes don't punish opinion, they punish the weaponization of animus. Survivor testimony anchored the case. Micah Fletcher, stabbed in the neck, took the stand and recounted the seconds that tied words to action. His account supplied a clean timeline. Racist harassment of the girls in hijabs, bystanders attempting to de-escalate, then a sudden lunge with a knife. Eyewitnesses filled gaps no camera could angles. Distances, the instant when a rant turned into homicide. The room went silent more than once. The state widened the lens beyond the train car. Prosecutors presented Christian's prior statements, online postings, and behavior to show his ideology and animus, including incidents after arrest. Disciplinary records from jail fights, threats, racial slurs toward a deputy illustrated a continuing pattern of aggression. This wasn't a bad minute on a bad day, they argued. It was an extremist worldview expressed through violence. The charging document told the story in legal terms. 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Best and Namkai Meche, 1 count of first-degree assault, and 1 of second-degree assault for Fletcher's injuries. 4 counts of second-degree intimidation to capture the hate crime component. Each charge carried its own elements, but together they mapped intent, premeditation, and bias across a public transit car, and they gave jurors a framework to separate protected speech from criminal conduct. Victim impact put human cost on the record. Demetria Hester, targeted by Christian's verbal abuse on a prior day, looked at him and said,
"And to Mr. Jeremy Christian, your mom should have swallowed you. You are a waste of breath. And when you die and go to hell, I hope you rot."
She also said the experience made her stronger, a message about survival in the face of hate that resonated in a city still grieving. The chaos was immediate, and its echo lingered. For jurors, the question narrowed to sequence and intent. Did the words telegraph the act? Did prior statements and on-scene threats reveal purpose, not passion? The prosecution argued the collision of ideology and violence was deliberate. The defense tried to keep the focus on speech, claiming that provocation and heat clouded judgment. Yet the timeline held. Oregon's homicide framework supplied the teeth. Aggravated and first-degree murder authorize life without parole when intent and aggravators are proven. Bias crimes enhance punishment when a defendant targets victims based on perceived identity, reinforcing the state's interest in keeping shared spaces safe. The law is a guardrail, not a gag. The verdict left no ambiguity, guilty on all counts. The sentence matched the harm. 2 life terms without the possibility of parole, the harshest outcome available, and a statement that free speech finds no shelter when paired with deadly force. The courtroom exhaled. The weight of justice remained. 2 courtrooms, 2 forms of crossing the line, authority misused, and ideology turned lethal. The next case asks how fear itself becomes the weapon and how a celebration can buckle under it.
That's not me. That's not him. I would never walk up to you and say those words to you. And I'm so sorry that happened to you.
The birthday party siege takes place in Douglas County, Georgia, July 2015, when a backyard gathering met a convoy calling itself Respect the Flag. How does a child's celebration become a crime scene without a single shot fired? You expect laughter, candles, a quick chorus. Instead, a caravan rolls up with Confederate flags raised and tempers high, and the street turns hostile. Racial slurs and threats are reported. A shotgun is pointed toward the crowd. The chaos was immediate, and the footage that followed became the spine of a prosecution built on fear turned into law. In this story, the argument starts with what expression is and what it becomes when a weapon enters the frame. The defense said this was expressive conduct and poor judgment. They claimed tempers flared, words flew, and then the crowd and the convoy fed each other's anger. They pressed the idea that speech, even vile speech, is protected, and that the group's presence signaled identity rather than intent. Prosecutors answered with structure and purpose. They described organized intimidation, a weaponized presence, and targeted terror by members of Respect the Flag. When the convoy slowed, shouted, and displayed a gun near a family gathering, the state said it crossed a legal threshold. The convoy didn't just appear, it coordinated. The effect wasn't debate, it was fear. Parents pulled children behind them. A celebration buckled. Georgia law speaks to that fear. The terroristic threat statute punishes threats to commit a crime of violence when those threats are communicated and intended to terrorize or cause serious public disruption. It's not about silencing opinion, it's about punishing the use of threats as a tool. In the same breath, Georgia's aggravated assault turns on a deadly weapon used to place a person in reasonable apprehension of immediate harm. A firearm can transform words into a present danger. No shot needs to be fired for the law to recognize the harm. Evidence came in layers. Cell phone videos captured the convoy, the shouts, the distance between the street and the yard. You hear engines, see gestures, and catch the instant a shotgun raised toward the yard changes the stakes. The 911 call recorded panic, voices pleading for help, parents trying to shield children, as the scene unfolded in real time. Investigators mapped coordination, multiple vehicles, consistent symbols, and a route that brought the group to that house. The weapon display gave the state what it needed, a clear act that turned speech into an actionable threat. The human stakes were plain. Parents shielding children, adults moving guests off the lawn, a cake left to melt. In court, impact statements traced the aftermath. Sleep lost, routines broken, a home that felt less safe. The scale of harm was not measured in bruises, but in the way fear seeped into daily life. That's a form of injury the statute is designed to confront. Court logic sorted roles and culpability. Jose Torres faced aggravated assault exposure tied to pointing the shotgun, a direct use of a deadly weapon to instill reasonable fear of immediate harm. Kayla Norton did not brandish the weapon, which narrowed her exposure to threats and party to a crime liability. But the state still traced her participation in the convoy's approach and coordinated presence. The hierarchy of culpability followed acts, not affiliations. Charges reflected that hierarchy and the organized nature of the intimidation. Alongside terroristic threats and aggravated assault, prosecutors invoked Georgia's Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act, arguing Respect the Flag functioned as a group engaged in criminal conduct. The statutes created a framework where coordinated intimidation in a public space could be punished for its method and its impact, not just its message. As sentencing neared, the arguments widened to the community. Prosecutors sought terms that would deter public terror, emphasizing that family events, sidewalks, and driveways must stay outside the reach of organized intimidation. They pointed to the need for a clear message. When fear is used like a weapon, the law responds with weight. The defense pleaded remorse and community ties, underscoring statements of contrition and the absence of physical injury as grounds for mercy. The numbers delivered the message. Torres received 13 years in prison plus 7 years of probation. Norton received 6 years in prison plus 9 years of probation. The court banned both from Douglas County. At sentencing, Norton said,
I do accept responsibility for what I've done. I know I was in the wrong. But I want you all to know that that is not me.
a remarkable act of grace that did not erase legal consequences. The disparity in punishment reflected the distinct acts, the weapon involvement, and how Georgia draws lines when speech travels with a gun. 3 rooms, 3 crossings, power, speech, and fear. What follows asks you to weigh how the law answers intimidation before it leaves bruises, and what that answer means for the streets you share. Here's where the threads meet. Conclusion is simple and hard at once. The law doesn't wait for bruises. It criminalizes intimidation that corrodes public safety, whether it wears a badge, a slogan, or a flag. In one room, a judge told an officer he betrayed your city and caused severe anguish, a direct rebuke at sentencing in the Melendez case. In another, the prosecution's line, "That is a threat," defined fear as a weapon in Douglas County. You live inside these lines: trains, sidewalks, birthday lawns. The statutes are guardrails. The impact is lived. Subscribe for more courtroom consequences and tell us where the line should fall. 3 rooms, 3 sentences, 1 message. The weight of justice is heavy and its memory is long. Subscribe and follow Red Tape Red Flag on all platforms. And don't forget to like, share, and comment.